Up next, we're going to have a conversation with our Attorney General, Dana Nessel. As you know, Attorney General Nessel has been serving our state for the last 7 years as Attorney General. One of her focuses has been on organized retail theft. And that may sound like a complicated issue, but we're going to have a conversation with the Attorney General to explain it and why it's important to Michiganders. So, Attorney General, thank you for being here, and I look forward to hearing the conversation.
Yeah, so thank you just so much for stopping on by. I know that we wanted to talk about your organized retail fraud unit, and I was wondering, for the folks at home who may not even be aware that this exists, can you walk us through what it is and what the goals of this unit are?
Yeah, well, we've seen in recent years a proliferation of organized retail crime. And I think when people think of that, they think of shoplifting, right? Petty offenses, and maybe you have somebody who's grabbing an eyeliner here or there. But that's not what we're talking about. This is, a huge industry. We're talking about, criminal syndicates, many times transnational in nature, that are preying upon the businesses, the brick and mortar businesses in the state of Michigan to the tune of some $2 billion in losses. And so a few years ago, we organized this organized retail crime unit in a force team. And we worked with the legislature to change the law, and we changed our racketeering law, known as CCE, a continuing criminal enterprise, so that retail fraud was a predicate offense, because we're talking about these gangs, large-scale operations involving boosters and fencers, who come in and they'll target a store and sometimes steal millions and millions of dollars in product. And of course, that's bad for the retailers. It means that stores have to close, and we were seeing that, frankly, in communities all over the state of Michigan, that stores just literally could not afford to operate anymore because their theft losses were so great. But in addition, it hurts consumers because they have to increase prices to make up for all of their large-scale losses. So what we did after the law was changed is, we worked with the legislature to fund this unit and put in initial appropriation of about $3.5 million, with the expectation that eventually the unit would be self-funded based on our criminal asset forfeitures, because we were recovering so much, and wildly successful. In our first 2 years alone, 54 investigations we completed. We charged 71 defendants, and we are recouping a large amount of money and product on behalf of these businesses, but again, in a way that also benefits consumers.
Now, this is a national model. Am I correct in that? That the other states look to us because of the successes that Force has had.
Yeah, we're really proud of how we organize this. We call it the Force team. So it's the Department of Attorney General, where we have investigators, we have prosecutors, we have analysts, but they work directly in concert with Michigan State Police, with the FBI, with the Postal Service. And we also work, of course, with our private partnerships with all the big retailers. And so we know in real time what's happening. They work out of a dedicated unit that is in part of Michigan State Police in Livonia. And they have everything on site. They can even watch in real time what's happening in stores all over the state of Michigan.
Wow.
So that they see the crime sometimes before it's even happening. Sometimes they're tracing people. They can see that some of these criminals are in the parking lots ready to go into a particular store, so that they can be communicating with police on site that are in the area. So because we have a dedicated unit like this, what a lot of the other states were doing, what a lot of the other AGs around the country, they might have a case here or there,
right,
but they didn't have a standalone dedicated unit the way that we do. So putting together this unit where we have people that, these are specialists, this is all they do all day, every day, and so they really understand the nuances, and they understand the technology, which is ever evolving. So as a result, it's been very successful, and I'm proud of the fact that our ORC unit gets asked to go all over the state, all over the country to do presentations on the work that they're doing here.
So was there a catalyst, an event that happened in Michigan that prompted the creation of this, or was it just eventually you said, this is something that we're lacking in and I see a place that we can step up?
Well, it was a couple things. One, you would see those smash and grabs sometimes on TV.
Yeah.
It didn't necessarily happen in the state of Michigan. Sometimes you'd see things that were happening in San Francisco or Chicago or whatnot. But you knew it was only a matter of time before that was going to come here. So it's not just the theft, it's the violence involved in some of these theft cases. And you had many situations, in fact, where retailers were just writing these losses off because they thought there was nothing they could do about it, because it was such a difficult problem to handle with the resources that law enforcement had at that time. We knew what the losses were, so we knew they were significant, and you could actually track stores that were closing all over the state, particularly in certain cities like Detroit, where I would see like CVS say, we just can't afford to stay open anymore because we can't handle all the retail losses that are coming about. So again, it's bad for a number of different reasons, but it's particularly bad if, you can't get to a drugstore because the drugstores are closing down because of all the theft that's occurring. So the partnerships with the retailers, I think, was critically important. And for them to know that they had a partner, the Department of Attorney General, that they could work with, and as soon as a situation arose, they knew exactly who to contact to ensure not just that you were tackling criminal activity after it happened, but oftentimes before it occurred.
And so what kind of feedback are you getting from these retailers who you are helping them to recoup their losses?
Yeah, it's been incredibly positive. And as I said, certainly a model for the nation. We know how successful it's been, but the message that I think has been sent loud and clear is for these, criminal syndicates, it's not going to be worth your while to operate in the state of Michigan. So take that elsewhere, because if you come to Michigan, you're going to get caught and you're going to go to prison.
So I am curious, because I do remember seeing, especially videos on the news of those smash and grabs. Even before force, sort of where do we stand when it comes to organized retail crime like that? Are we a high propensity state for it, middle, low? Where do we stand?
We were a high propensity state, but those numbers are coming down dramatically, and I think you'll see that statistically, that the criminals are aware of this. They know in what states it's going to be easier to get away with these crimes, and what states it's going to be more difficult. And so I think that we're seeing a dramatic decrease in the amount of organized retail crime that we've had in the state. And like I said, the numbers will bear that out. But I think you speak to the retailers, they'll tell you that their losses are decreasing as we move forward with this project.
So I know a moment ago you said you're working towards a self-funding through the civil asset forfeiture.
Criminal asset
Criminal,
forfeiture.
excuse me. Yes,
we don't
of
have
course.
civil asset
Of course,
forfeiture anymore.
my apologies. But to that point, I guess I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to how that money is used to help you guys accomplish the work that they do. Right,
and that's something that we're in negotiations with the legislature on right now. But it's basically when we recoup, sometimes we're directly recouping cash. Sometimes it's crypto, and oftentimes it's merchandise. But obviously we want to make sure that the retailers are compensated, but we do want a percentage of that to go to directly fund the unit, because it's the deterrence factor, right? So it benefits the state, it benefits those retailers, and it doesn't cost the state anything then because of money that we're getting from the criminal asset forfeiture. So that, whether it's currency or whether it's product, the product goes and is stored in a warehouse. The crypto, one of our cases alone, we recouped a certain amount of crypto. The amount went up exponentially in value.
Yeah.
And so it allowed us then to turn that around and to have it be a much higher amount that could be utilized to fund those prosecutors and investigators and those analysts. So we're trying to make this revenue neutral, but at the end of the day, again, it's saving money not just for our retailers, but it's saving money for consumers all over the state.
So you mentioned crypto, and I know sometimes when people hear crypto, they will think, online, blockchain, things of that nature. So is there a cyber arm to this force, task force as well?
There's a cyber element to it, for certain. And I will say this, much of what we see ends up online. So with our the products, they're stolen from these stores, and then we'll see them on eBay or on Amazon. So this involves, making sure that we have partnerships, not just with the brick and mortar stores, but also with the online retailers as well, and all working together so that as soon as we identify that an item is up online, that we know it's been stolen, that's taken down, and that we are working with Amazon or eBay or Facebook or whoever to try to identify who it was that placed that item up for sale in the first place. But yes, a lot of it happens through crypto, which makes it a little bit more challenging to trace. But so far, we've been pretty successful in doing that.
It's amazing. And so to that point, I mean, we've talked a lot about the successes that you guys have had, and please forgive me if we've hit on this already, but I remember in June of last year, you said you had about 40 open cases. I was wondering kind of where that number stands now.
Well, as I indicated, we have 54 completed investigations.
Yes.
71 defendants have been charged. Many of them have already been convicted. Some
Yes.
of them are serving prison time right now. And we have obviously a lot of active investigations that we're continuing to pursue. And if anything, we're trying to expand the unit. So what we've seen is this exponential rise in auto theft cases, much higher than we've ever seen historically. And I think a lot of that has to do, frankly, with the technology. It's just easier to steal a car than ever. And unfortunately, the dealerships and the manufacturers really haven't caught up to the criminals yet in terms of finding ways to ensure that it's more difficult to steal a vehicle. So what we're trying to do now is to expand into this. One of our biggest cases actually involved, massive theft of automobiles from dealerships. I think it's in the neighborhood of some 400 vehicles that were stolen by over a dozen defendants. And, this is an exceptional amount of money that we're talking about. In many cases, vehicles being driven right off of the lots, sometimes in a fashion looks like a video game, I mean, building ramps and driving the cars off, and sometimes, very violent interactions with the police, ramming security vehicles. I mean, very, very dangerous stuff. Violent criminals. Again, you think of auto theft and you don't think of something as being violent, but we're talking about a lot of violent incidences that can hurt real people who are just out there, driving on our freeways or on our neighborhood streets. So we are attempting to expand the unit to make sure that we are involving a lot more of these wide-scale auto thefts. And again, it's something that affects each and every person. Anybody who's had their car stolen can talk about how injurious that is to them personally. And so we're trying to do everything we can to combat that.
You kind of touched on it there with your last answer, but with the few minutes that we have left, what do you see as the future of force? And where maybe, you talked about the auto arm of it, but where else do you see areas of expansion or improvement?
Yeah, well, certainly in the auto theft realm, I will say this, we could be handling, twice as many cases right now if we had the staff to do it. And I will say, and I know that you've been having conversations with a lot of legislators about budget-related issues. I get concerned. I know that you probably saw the skinny budget that was passed by the House. And for all your readers, listeners, viewers, our budget was $0 in that skinny budget. I think it goes without saying that the quickest way to bankrupt the state of Michigan would be to allocate $0 to our unit. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that we have so many projects that are ongoing. And again, this project is wildly successful. And I get concerned when I hear about, again, massive budget cuts to our office without the introspection into exactly what our department is doing. And again, I mean, a unit like this, the cost savings to the state of Michigan, to the people of the state of Michigan, I mean, millions and millions of dollars every single year. And I think it's important to recognize the importance of having these kinds of units in place, and where it makes sense to do so, expanding those units. And I think this would be a prime example. Our ORC unit, if anything, we need more people. So I get concerned when I hear about massive budget cuts potentially coming to our department, understanding that we are saving so much money to the state, saving so much money to the people of our state.
Well, I believe that's time for us, but thank you very much, Attorney General. I really appreciate you sitting down and talking with us on this, and just thanks again for coming to the policy conference.
Thanks for having me.